Everyone. Welcome back, everyone. So some big stories for the night. First of all, we're going to talk about abortion being on trial. The Supreme Court is set to hear an abortion case that could actually maybe do something with Roe versus Wade and with some other major abortion decisions. This is really the one that I think a lot of people, whichever side of the aisle you've been on with this issue, have been waiting for, especially when it comes to Trump having appointed some of his own Supreme Court justices. The new case could see them possibly overturn Roe versus Wade. We'll have to see. At the very least, it will give them the ability to look into it. We're going to be going into that tonight. Also going to be talking about how product prices are rising across the United States. I know a lot of people have been talking about this, observing that things are more expensive, seemingly suddenly. It's not your imagination. Prices are going up across the United States. There's a boom in manufacturing costs as well, which very likely could cause some other issues when it comes to consumer prices. I'm going to be explaining that. Some other stories to go into, folks, and also going to have some updates on what's happening with the election audits. Now, all that and more, folks, stick around. And again, also, if you have questions, leave them in the chat. We'll try to get to them. Also, folks, for those of you on Epoch TV watching this, around the 15 minutes towards the end, we're going to jump over to Epoch TV. I'll be doing the election audit section on Epoch TV exclusively. We're going to be testing out the live chat features. So, folks, if you have Epoch TV, please jump onto that. We're going to be testing out the live chat features tonight. So that said, folks, again, wonderful seeing you all here. Yeah, Ron Keeney, good to see you as well. Reno Tron, good to see you. Thank you. Diane Batt, hi, Josh from Canada. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, folks, you're great. Always enjoy doing these lives with y'all. All right, folks, that said, let's jump into the first story for the night. Let's talk what's happening with this abortion trial happening. All right, first story, Epoch Times reports this. It says Supreme Court agrees to take on major abortion case. It says here, the U.S. Supreme Court on Monday agreed to take a major abortion case that would consider Mississippi's appeal of a lower court ruling that reversed a ban on most abortion after 15 weeks of pregnancy. Right? It says here, the case will grant the Supreme Court the opportunity to reconsider landmark abortion rulings, including Roe versus Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey, with Roe versus Wade in a ruling that was derided by conservatives and religious adherents. The High Court in 1973 ruled that a woman had a right to end an abortion and reaffirmed it about 20 years later. Now, in a single-line order, the court wrote, quote, the petition for a writ of certiorari is granted limited to question 1 presented by the petition. Now, in other words, folks, the Supreme Court right now is going to be hearing a case. They've agreed to hear the case, meaning it's going to be going through on abortion. Specifically, on the surface, they're going to be hearing this case about 15-week abortions, right? Abortions conducted after 15 weeks of pregnancy. But through this, by opening this up in the Supreme Court, they can possibly overturn Roe versus Wade if they choose to. They could overturn Planned Parenthood versus Casey if they choose to, which means the Supreme Court with this hearing will have the ability, if they decide to do so, to basically ban abortion if they want to in the United States. Now, it's not clear whether that's going to happen. They might just look into the heartbeat bill type thing. They might just look into the 15-week limit that the technical court hearing is going to be on. We'll have to see, folks. Could look into broader issues that could stick within the framework they've been given. Either way, we'll have to see on this, and again, I'll keep you all updated on it. Now, the interesting thing right now happening in the U.S. is the way the courts have gone. You see the Supreme Court playing a much larger role within really like the way the country's run to a large extent. We saw under Trump, for example, that, Ninth Circuit judges or Seventh Circuit judges were overturning his executive orders. We saw, for example, we've been seeing increasingly that a lot of cases are going up to the level of the Supreme Court. And as this happens, the rulings from the Supreme Court could actually affect much broader things than just the cases they're set to hear. Meaning that as this is happening, really the country could be changed quite a bit amid all these different cases. On that note as well, remember that New York, there's the New York versus NRA case also going to the Supreme Court, National Rifle Association. And that hearing in particular, the Supreme Court is also set to hear, could possibly make it legal or illegal to have concealed carries in any state. New York City having some of the tightest concealed carry laws in the country. It's very, very hard to get a gun in New York. In fact, even squirt guns, if they look like real guns, they're called replica weapons, and they are regulated in New York City. It's very hard to get anything. Even BB guns and black powder rifles are very hard to get in New York City, regulated just the same way as others. But the issue we see here is very similar. These Supreme Court decisions, the one with abortion, could, within its jurisdiction, overturn abortion. The case when it comes to the NRA could, for example, either change the laws across the nation when it comes to gun rights and when it comes to concealed carries, or possibly go the opposite way. It could go either way with this. We'll have to see. Right now, conservatives technically have the majority in the Supreme Court. Remember, Trump appointed 3 different justices. We'll have to see how they lean, because we did see, for example, that they refused to hear a lot of the election cases that he brought forward. We'll have to see how it goes. Now, folks, a couple other things happening right now when it comes to courts I want to go into. One very interesting case as well that just happened, one that was determined, right? Could actually have a lot to do with what happens with people facing trial for criminal cases going forward. This is a very broad decision that was just made in the Supreme Court. A next story here, it says this: Supreme Court issues ruling on unanimous jury verdict requirements. And it says here, the U.S. Supreme Court on May 17th, just recently, reiterated that the Constitution requires unanimous jury verdicts for state criminal trials, but it doesn't apply retroactively, which denies relief to thousands of inmates who are found guilty via divided juries. Now, this is a big deal. What this means, really, is that anybody now who is facing criminal charges in different courts across the United States, and you have a jury, if the jury is not unanimous, you could get off scot-free. Even if, all but one of the jury members thinks you're guilty, you could be innocent. You can go free. Now, this is in accordance with the Constitution. Technically, according to the Constitution, this law was already in place. But some states were practicing it differently. Some states were not upholding this part of the Constitution. When it comes to this, part of the arguments they had around this in the Supreme Court were specifically on whether it could be applied retroactively. In other words, people who were convicted but had split juries, whether those individuals could be let out of prison, for example, if it was a split jury. That was one of the main divisions on this case within the Supreme Court among the justices. Now, the article says this, specifically on this ruling. It says the court ruled 6-3 to reaffirm last year's decision that the Constitution requires a unanimous conviction. However, this time around, the Supreme Court argued in its majority opinion that it didn't necessitate reopening closed cases. In other words, if you've already been found guilty on something, even if it was a split jury, you stay guilty. Not to say that some people in different states may request retrials or may try to make constitutional arguments. Now that the Supreme Court has argued this, although the Supreme Court has determined it does not apply retroactively. Now, continuing on this, it says this. It says Justice Brett Kavanaugh provided the majority opinion and was joined by Chief Justice John Roberts and Justices Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, Neil Gorsuch, and Amy Coney Barrett. The 3 members of the liberal wing of the court, Justices Stephen Breyer, Alina Kagan, and Sonia Sotomayor, dissented. Specifically, the Democrat-appointed justices dissented on them saying that this could not be applied retroactively. And so, folks, this does affect things going forward. If you are charged with a crime, you stand in front of a jury, and it's a split jury, you are innocent. You get off scot-free as long as one person is on your side within the jury. This is going to make it much more difficult to convict people going forward unless you have a unanimous jury. But again, it will not apply retroactively. Now, just briefly, we're working on some interesting features when it comes to constitutional law, and there's some very interesting notes about the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. Now, in the founding days of the United States, the Supreme Court really wasn't supposed to get involved on the legislative side of the system. Even according to the 10th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, technically, under the Constitution, the federal government does not have jurisdiction outside of what is included within the Constitution. Meaning anything that is not included in the Constitution, any law or any area that's not included in it, is out of bounds for the federal government. Actually, according to the way the founding fathers were, how things were at the time, the federal government was actually very limited in its scope of power. Founding fathers, including Thomas Jefferson, noted this as being one of the virtues of the system they created. The states, however, when it came to state law and the state ability to create law, was almost limitless. The Supreme Court, the judicial branch of our government, right? The judicial branch of our government was a bit more limited as well. They weren't supposed to get involved in legislation. That changed under FDR, Franklin D. Roosevelt, under whom, when he made some changes to the Constitution and the way things are done in this country, really expanded the scope of government to an extent. It was further done by Lyndon B. Johnson much later. But around the time of World War II, changes that were made to our system did expand the reach of the Supreme Court. Hence, where we're at today, where the Supreme Court actually is able to really change the laws of the country. And so what's happening at the Supreme Court right now really can do a lot. Folks, I'm just seeing a lot of you saying you're having issues with freezing. We're now broadcasting in 1080p, and so if there are huge buffering issues, we don't know why it's like this. If there are buffering issues, you could try lowering the video resolution. We're getting notes that it is happening. People are saying it's not YouTube. We don't actually know why it's doing this. It's apparently, okay, I'm getting a note. It's not because of our resolution. We don't know why it's buffering like this. It's apparently not a YouTube issue, which means it might be some server level issue. It's not a resolution issue, but it does seem to be the case that the video has a weird buffering issue. A lot of people are noting this. Anybody who has Epoch TV, try to jump onto there. We are broadcasting. Oh, sorry, it is a YouTube issue. It's not a resolution issue. It's a YouTube issue. And so we don't know why it's happening, but it does seem to be a YouTube issue. We are broadcasting also on Facebook Live right now. Those of you who have Epoch TV, epochtv.com, we are broadcasting live there as well. Yeah, very sorry to hear, folks. We don't know why it's doing this. All right, let's go a bit further into the stories for the night. Then we'll go into some questions, and we'll go over this a bit more. Now, one more issue when it comes to the courts, because again, folks, right now there's a lot happening within the courts, and what's happening in the courts is really kind of the bastion when it comes to the defense of the Constitution, right? The last bastion when it comes to the defense of the Constitution. Many of the things happening right now with the courts and with the challenges to the Constitution really could determine the structure of government that we have in this country. Keep in mind, folks, in the United States, our government technically is the Constitution. And the Constitution restricts government quite a bit. Now, you could argue that already in some areas, in some states, technically, according to the Constitution, states have these rights. But because of the changes made to the judicial branch of our government around the time of, again, World War II, under Franklin D. Roosevelt, the reach of the Supreme Court was expanded. And so it is the case now that what the Supreme Court decides could actually determine, based on their interpretation of the Constitution, could determine even state law to an extent, meaning what is happening with the courts right now. And keep in mind, we do have a conservative appointed majority Supreme Court right now. What happens in the Supreme Courts right now could change the laws of the nation. And again, when it comes to the gun rights, Second Amendment, when it comes to abortion, this is happening. Now, there's another one the Supreme Court may be hearing. It's It's a bit further off right now, but this is something that's been discussed for a long time, and the cases on this are moving forward. Now it says here, it says farmers sue over federal regulation of mud puddle on their land. Now, this sounds minor, but it's actually a big deal. Basically, what happens under the environmental protection laws in the US and the way that EPA runs, right, the Environmental Protection Association, the way it technically runs is that if you have a mud puddle on your land, it could fall under federal kind of jurisdiction because of the way they zone it. Now, technically, constitutionally, right, and that's a key word here, constitutionally, the federal government does not have the ability to claim ownership over that. But because a lot of farmers in the US get subsidies from the government, it's been argued that these subsidies basically make them subject to the rule of the federal government. Now, although this is an argument over mud puddles and this is an argument over farmers, it actually has much broader implications. Because basically, this is the argument that's used for this, is that if you accept government subsidies, right? If you accept money from the government, it can change your rights. It can make you subject, again, to federal law. And as this case gets heard, this could determine that particular factor. Let's go into it. Epoch Times reports a farming family is suing the federal government over its demand that they leave what the family argues is a mud puddle in the middle of their farm intact because it considers the ground to be a federally protected wetland. It says the legal complaint in the case, Foster versus U.S. Department of Agriculture, was filed earlier this month in U.S. District Court in South Dakota. The lawsuit was filed by the Sacramento, California-based Pacific Legal Foundation, a national public interest law firm. Now, the puddle they're talking about here is about 0.8 acres in size and roughly 8 inches deep. 8 inches deep, right? Less than a foot deep. Now, it says the family's rights are, quote, being violated by being subjected to federal micromanagement of how they farm in order to protect a mud puddle. That's according to Tony Francois, a senior PLF attorney, the lawyer on the case against the federal government. He told this to the Epoch Times in an interview, and he continues saying, quote, the suit, when it is successful, will allow them the freedom to use their property as they see best. And here's the important part. He says the government has no power to regulate how you use mud puddles on your property, but because they provide things like crop insurance assistance, the government has power over them. And that is the main issue that this is going to be addressing. That is the main issue that this will address going forward, especially if the Supreme Court hears it. Whether, if you accept federal assistance, does that make you subject to government action that normally violates your constitutional rights? In other words, folks, you are protected against things like this by the Constitution, and the argument under the USDA system on regulating things like mud puddles, right? The argument the government's been using is that if you accept federal assistance, it makes you ineligible to those rights because you are then under the federal government and they can control it as they see fit. Now, we can see how big of a reach this ends up having, right? We can see how big of a reach this ends up having because if this does go to the Supreme Court, let's see where it goes. It might, because many cases have been, and this does impact federal level law. If this does go to the Supreme Court, this could determine really what it means for businesses, for farmers, for any institution, for you. If you accept government assistance, does that acceptance of government assistance make you subject to federal law, which could, for example, strip you of constitutional rights? That is what this argument could encompass. Now, folks, I'll keep you updated on all this. There are several cases like this. I think these are some of the major ones happening in the U.S. right now. I'll be going into a lot of stuff like this, folks, so stick around, and I'll give you updates on it as we go forward. Now, that said, let's go into a couple more stories, then we'll go into some questions for the night. Now, I know I've seen a lot of comments from people talking about how prices seem to be going up, that they go to the supermarket, they go to the stores, and in some states, things seem to be costing more money. Well, folks, it's actually not your imagination. Prices are actually going up on consumer products across the country. And we're going to go into why that is, what's causing this, and where it may be heading. The Epoch Times reports this. It says, as prices rise, Fed dismisses inflation worries. This is the Federal Reserve, which is neither federal nor reserve, right? But prints our money. But let's go into it. It says here, quote, although inflationary pressures keep building in the U.S. economy, economists believe Federal Reserve officials are unlikely to tighten monetary policy before seeing significant improvement in labor markets. And it says here, from gas to groceries, right? If you're buying meat, if you're buying produce, right? From gas prices to grocery prices, Americans have started to see prices increase in recent weeks as the economy reopens. It says here, used cars and truck prices, for example, surged 21% year over year. 21% increase if you want to buy a used car, including a 10% increase just in April. Just in April, there's a 10% rise in the cost of a car, right? Used car. It says here, surveys also show that U.S. businesses are raising prices for their goods and services at a rate not seen since the late 1970s and early 1980s, when inflation was running at double digits. Now, folks, we've been told mixed things on inflation. We've been hearing we won't see inflation. We've been hearing now they're walking back on this. The Federal Reserve is now saying that we may see some inflation. Now, on this, we're seeing multi-trillion-dollar spending by the federal government, over $6 trillion in proposed spending, which is many times more than the normal federal budget. Right? These bailout packages, yes, you get a check in the mail, you get some money in the mail, but this has its other implications. And a lot of that money that was taken through these stimuluses, these multi-trillion-dollar stimuluses, a lot of that money does not go to the American people. A lot of it went to state bailouts, subsidizing what were already failed socialist policies, like in New York, like in California. A lot of it was payment packages to foreign countries. A lot of it was under the guise of things that had to do with, again, the virus, right? Helping people deal with the virus, but in practice had nothing to do with the virus whatsoever, like building camel statues literally in the Middle East, like paying for, Asian carp studies, like paying for gender studies in Pakistan. This is where American taxpayer money was going, and that multi-trillion dollars in spending seems to be the case is coming back now to bite us. Not to mention the case that they're talking about funding some of these efforts through increases on corporate taxes. And folks, normally when we talk about corporations, especially corporate taxes, people usually think of the big businesses. They think of big tech. They think of big pharma. They think of these big, monolithic, huge companies, right, that are run by these multi-billionaires who don't really care about the average person. Now, the irony is that it's not often the case. Your mom and pop shop down the street, your local gas station, privately owned, may be a registered corporation. Most people who open businesses tend to register them as corporations because it gives you certain legal protections and other protections that you actually need. It's not actually hard to register a corporation. If the federal government increases corporate taxes, that in turn affects most of the businesses. And now we're seeing that businesses are raising the prices. That means there's a trickle-down cost to that, also to $15 minimum wage being pushed as well, that are forcing manufacturers to increase their prices, in addition to the lockdowns that they were already facing, meaning that companies were already facing tightening, let's say, monetary problems because of the lockdowns. Many of these factors are working hand in hand in order to make the prices rise. And folks, this is snowballing, it seems, down to the consumer level, where again, we're seeing, 21% increases in cost of used cars, 10% just in April. And in other areas, to the extent that they're now talking about inflation costs rising to the highest level since the 1970s and 1980s. Now, we'll go into this a bit more. Real quick, folks, a few of you are still asking about what's going on with YouTube. Our folks in the back end, we do have a team in the back end, they're saying that there's nothing wrong on the surface. The feed is okay. Everything seems to be okay. It does appear to be a YouTube issue, not a real buffering issue, unless YouTube's having problems. It seems to be only impacting us on the YouTube side, not on the back end side. And so I don't know why YouTube's doing this. Well, good night to choose it, because we are broadcasting live on Epoch TV tonight, and we are testing on Epoch TV tonight, epochtv.com/crossroads. We are testing there tonight our live chat function. And so if YouTube's going to do this to us, whether intentional or not, tonight's the right night to do it. So we'll see. All right, folks, let's go a bit more into what's happening with this inflation, because another important part here, specifically an observation in New York that could impact the rest of the country. Let's go into it. Epoch Times reports, producer prices surged to record highs in New York, reinforcing consumer inflation concerns. Now, this is just happening in New York, this study, but they note that the findings of the study could actually apply to the rest of the country. This could give us some insight into why the prices are rising and what's really behind this. Now, it says here, a new report by the New York Federal Reserve showed that May manufacturing prices in New York State soared to record highs. That's manufacturing prices increasing, providing it another data point in support of the view that more consumer price inflation may be on the horizon. In other words, folks, the increase of prices on the consumer level may continue. What we're experiencing with this inflation on the consumer level, this is prices, costs of goods and services, may just be starting. Already we're at some of the highest levels we've seen since the 1970s and 1980s. It says here, the monthly Empire State Manufacturing Survey, released Monday, shows that both input prices and selling prices rose at a record-setting pace in May. The survey's prices paid index hit a record 83.5% in May, while the prices received index rose to 37.1, also the highest level in the history of the series. Highest level in the history of the series. Now, based on a poll of around 200 manufacturers in New York State, the survey measures price movements from the perspective of cost to industry or producers to products before they're likely to be passed on to consumers. In other words, folks, it's coming from the raw materials level, it seems, that the cost of raw materials is increasing, which means manufacturers have to increase their prices in order to compensate for the price of materials rising. Manufacturers pass it on to the retailers. They raise the cost. And then again, we're the ones who have to buy those increased prices. Something is happening, whether it's caused by, again, the minimum wage laws, whether, again, it's caused by the corporate tax policies getting pushed through, or something else. We'll have to see. Something is causing things on the raw materials level to cause huge increases. Now, it continues a bit further into the story, stating this. It says, while the manufacturing survey is limited to New York State, it does provide some insight into the inflationary pressure that some economists have been warning about. Former National Economic Council Director and Treasury Secretary Larry Summers told Axios in May that, quote, data are pointing more towards higher inflation than I expected and sooner. And so, folks, get ready for inflation. Get ready for inflation because it's here. And they've been warning about it. People have been saying it's coming because, well, you don't spend more than $6 trillion in federal money, and you don't lock down businesses for over a year and not have inflation technically. It's to be expected. Now, the Biden administration is saying that they were hoping to not have inflation. They were saying early on their tax policies would not cause inflation. They were saying early on would not cause it because they believed they could pay, for example, for the infrastructure bill and other things by increasing corporate taxes. The increase of price on the corporate tax and federal minimum wage are trying to push through and other things. That is dependent on them being able to make other countries also increase their taxes, because what is going to happen if other countries don't increase taxes? What's going to happen is what Trump was warning about, that businesses are just going to leave the United States. Businesses are going to leave the United States, take their business elsewhere, and then we're going to have to pay them right? What become foreign businesses, paying them rather than having American jobs, rather than having American manufacturing, and we are beholden to what they want to charge. Now, we'll have to see what happens with this going forward. Again, this is just starting to happen. The inflation that we've been getting warned about for quite a while now. That said, folks, I'll keep you updated on this as we go forward. Now, I want to go a bit into what's happening with the virus. And also, folks, towards the end of this program, I'm going to give you an update of what's happening with the audits now taking place. We're going to do the audit section just on Epoch TV. Because, again, tonight we're going to be testing the live chat function, which we're going to launch in full next Tuesday. Now, folks, those of you new here, those of you who have been on for a while, we have now officially launched Epoch TV. That's epochtv.com/crossroads. Again, epochtv.com/crossroads. Folks, it's $5 a month, less than $5 a month. That's less than a California gallon of gas, about the price of a nice cup of coffee. It's not much, folks, but it helps us keep going. It's something they can't censor. It's something that hopefully won't have issues like we're happening tonight where there's a weird buffering issue. We don't know why. Again, Crossroads is totally demonetized on YouTube, and our growth seems to have been stopped somehow, whether intentionally or not. Our future on YouTube is not looking so hot, to be honest. And so, folks, help us build this independent journalist platform. Help us create the future of video news. Go to epochtv.com/crossroads. Subscribe to Epoch TV. And folks, you'll be helping us keep the show going. You'll be helping us keep our other programs going. And also, you're going to be getting some great content. We have some great programs there. And it did not just Crossroads, but others as well. That said, we'll show you a quick trailer of what we're doing at Epoch TV. Then we'll go into the questions for the night. Jump into it now.
Well, if we can wipe out history, if we can wipe out the lessons, if we can wipe out wisdom and knowledge and understanding, if we can wipe those things out and have just a few people in control with the promise of we'll protect you, we'll take care of you, well, then you will be the guiding hand. Government will be the guiding hand, and it will be out of necessity that government will be a guiding hand. That's a real danger. And people don't a lot of times look at it like that. A lot of times they think that this whole evolutionary theory, that man just evolves into a better being. One, history tells us that that's not true.
All right, folks. Again, that's epochtv.com/crossroads. And Brenda Curry, you're asking, I'm already subscribed to the Epoch Times. Can you not get Crossroads there? So if you're already a subscriber to the Epoch Times, if you have our digital, our digital subscription, you already have Epoch TV. And so if you already have an Epoch Times subscription, go to epochtv.com/crossroads. You already have it. And folks, again, $4.99 a month, right? California gallon of gas. And folks, you'll help us keep the show going and support our programs also going forward. Again, we're really trying to create an uncensored platform, something that we won't have to worry about getting demonetized, something they can't stop, something that allows us to talk about any issue we see needing to be discussed. This is, we hope, the future of video news. We really hope this becomes the future of video news. And through this, folks, we can give you uncensored, honest news. Now, it says, jump into some questions for the night. And real quick, the drink tonight is Taiwanese mountain tea. Yeah, it's wonderful, actually. Highly recommended if you're all looking for a nice kind of like a white tea, green tea mix. It's very nice. All right, folks, let's jump into the questions. Let's see. First off here, this is from Scooter. You said, Joshua, I just read an article published February 2020 by the Canadian government that portrays a futuristic utopia utilizing technology, AI, and government to control every aspect of life. I'll get into that. It seems to clarify the endgame of social agendas we hear about and verifies the existence of technology that would make this possible. Have you perhaps seen this article, or would you be able to comment? I can give you the whole background on this, actually. That is technically what communism envisions. New York Times had a very similar article on it, promoting what they called high-tech communism. Now, I won't go too deep into the history of it, but technically this is classic Marxism. Now, if you don't recommend it, but if you ever read Das Kapital by Karl Marx, it's actually a very strange book from the surface, because in the beginning of the book, Karl Marx, and again, one of the founder of Marxism, one of the founders of communism, right? It existed prior to him, but he was the one who really popularized it, Marxism. Karl Marx was the co-author of the Communist Manifesto. He wrote another book called Das Kapital. Now, Das Kapital is a very strange book because it's thick. It says in the beginning of it, it criticizes the factories. It criticizes all the systems of labor. It criticizes all the businesses and calls them, they call people, wage slaves and things like this. But towards the end of it, he totally flips his narrative, and he begins really praising high-tech manufacturing and things like this. Keep in mind, he wrote this during the Industrial Revolution, right? And a lot of people who support Marxism tend to do so because they believe in some like Gaian, green theory, where they don't like the factories a lot of times. They don't like the big corporations a lot of times. If you get to the end of Das Kapital, Marx changes his tone. He supports these things, where he talks again about this beautiful automated future where humans live at the service of robots and kind of stuff. That kind of vision. A lot of early communists actually believed in that stuff. If you read Paradise Lost, for example, two of the main nonfiction or two of the main fiction books that portray what communism could become. One being George Orwell's 1984, where he writes about INGSOC, English socialism was the acronym he used, of what socialism would look like if carried out to its full extent in England, right? 1984 portrays George Orwell's vision of what socialism could become, again, INGSOC. The other main book like that would be Paradise Lost, one of the main books. And Paradise Lost really portrays this high-tech, futuristic society where there's no more religion and there's no more morals, but people live relatively comfortable lives. That is kind of the other side of communism, right? There's the totalitarian one that just persecutes everything, and Paradise Lost portrays that as well. But again, this idea of this high-tech society where tradition, morality has been eliminated, where religion has been eliminated, where the government kind of controls everything and people kind of live at the service of AI or machines or whatever. The technological society becomes advanced to the point where people can live off it, like the technology becomes the slaves essentially. That was again what Marx really envisioned, and it's important. This actually ties into the real essence of what communism is, of what Marxism is. We oftentimes debate communism only as an economic theory. In reality, if you go back to Ludwig von Mises, classic Austrian School of Economics, even during the time of Karl Marx, communism was not regarded as an economic theory. Communism was very specifically a metaphysical theory. In other words, metaphysical, beyond the physical. It was a religion, technically, specifically dealing with ontology, i.e., what is the destiny of man? What is the purpose of life? That is what communism was. And specifically, it was envisioning basically a religion without God. Government becomes the highest power. What do people look like if, quote unquote, liberated from moral restraints, from tradition, from the family structure, from religion, and the restraints that come with it? That is what communism really sets out to do. It sets out really to eliminate that. To eliminate traditions, to eliminate morality, to eliminate belief in God, right? Abolish the family structure. Communist Manifesto states communism destroys all religion and all morality. It says it does so and institutes nothing in its place. If you read Das Kapital towards the end of it, Marx explains that vision. And again, what you're explaining here is fully in line with what Marx envisioned. I did not read the Canadian government article, but New York Times had a very similar article on it, promoting this utopian dream that communists hope to achieve through socialism. Socialism being the system, communism being the imagined goal of it, and the process of which is, in its very nature, in its own written doctrine, meant to destroy morality, meant to destroy belief in God, meant to destroy the family structure and these types of things. So that's what they're talking about. This is from Crystal Braganza. You said, "Hi, Josh from Canada. Do you have any background on Dr. Theresa Tim? She is Canada's chief medical officer. There's very little known other than there are ties to WHO." I'm actually not familiar with her, and so I won't be able to comment at this time, but good to know. And folks, we're seeing a lot of these buffering issues on YouTube. I don't know what's going on with YouTube. On our back end, everything seems to be fine. It does not appear to be an issue. Again, on the video side or the recording side, which does suggest it is happening on the YouTube side, we don't know why it's buffering so much on YouTube. So we don't know why. We don't know what's going on with it. This is from Eon. You said, "Hey, Josh, great reporting. You will be on the right side of history." Thank you. You said, "I'm wondering what will happen when they find the election fraud. Thoughts?" Well, folks, I'll be getting into this on Epoch TV in about 15 and about 10, well, pretty soon, actually, maybe 5 minutes. We'll jump onto Epoch TV for that segment. I want to get into that. We're going to be going to the election fraud and election audit section on Epoch TV, again, in about 5 minutes-ish. One important update for all of you, though, allegedly, remember we talked about how there was this lost database. It seemed to have been deleted. That was discovered in the Maricopa County audit. The auditors claimed that the entire database for the election appeared to have been deleted. Well, Maricopa County responded to it, and they said that was false and defamatory, that it had not been deleted. Now, folks, the auditors claim they found the file, or I should say they claim they recovered the file. Something very important. Actually, on that note, just because you delete something on your computer doesn't mean it's gone. You can still recover it. In fact, there's even consumer software you can use to recover things, even including if you delete it and then format your system, meaning you take the extra step, i.e. like bleach bit, right? To try to eliminate records, they can sometimes be recovered, sometimes not fully, but partially to that extent. But if it wasn't fully deleted well and, say gone over several times to make it wiped clean, even then some of it can be recovered, but typically you can recover most of it. They claim now that they have recovered the database that they believed had been deleted. Big update, folks. I'll be going into that a bit more in just a bit on Epoch TV. Another question here from Perk I2CD. He said, "Hi, Josh. Were you able to do any research on the ESG scores that are being assigned to companies that will question future access and funding?" Question. I have not, but I will make a note of it. I'm not aware of this. At least I'm not aware of the ESG acronym. Make a note of this for later. Next question is from Drieva. You said, "Hi, Josh. Are you saying a Supreme Court decision in New York City could have an effect on gun carry laws in other states nationwide? How can that be? 38 states are red states that support gun rights. Every state's constitution will prevent this from happening." We'll have to see, folks. So this is not a New York City case. This is a Supreme Court case. A Supreme Court case, specifically the NRA, the National Rifle Association, against the New York government on this, being heard by the Supreme Court. Now, the Supreme Court is able to interpret the Constitution, a right given to it by the Constitution, and through its interpretation of it, can dictate local law to an extent. You could see states try to push back against it, but typically if the Supreme Court rules, states have limited ability to oppose it. Now, again, this is not being heard in New York. This is an NRA versus New York. And it's being heard by the Supreme Court. And again, the Supreme Court does have a conservative appointed majority. And so, folks, the Supreme Court, the conservative appointed majority would very likely, we would assume, rule in favor of the NRA rather than New York. And so I don't think the states have to worry, in my analysis, based on the Supreme Court and its political positioning, I don't think states have to worry about gun rights being overturned. I think more like the blue states have to worry about their gun restrictions possibly being overturned. I'll have to see. Real quick, folks, Epoch TV is working. Live chat is working on Epoch TV. If you have Epoch TV, jump there now. We're going to be going over the election audits there in just a bit. First, I want to talk very briefly about what's happening with the virus updates. Real quick, folks, before we jump to Epoch TV exclusively on this, let's go into this real quick. It says, White House insists federal government won't implement COVID-19 vaccine passport system. It says here, the Biden administration again reiterated that the federal government won't implement or support a so-called COVID-19 virus vaccine passport system, suggesting the matter will be left to businesses. Now, specifically, Psaki said this. She said the private sector may, and it may prompt the private sector moving forward on actions, which is where we think it is appropriately situated. In other words, the Biden administration right now is saying that they will not institute a virus passport from the level of the federal government, but they're suggesting that businesses could, for example, create virus passport system, which the Biden administration does appear to be supportive of. And so while we may not have government enforced virus passport systems in the United States, at least not from the federal government, maybe state governments will choose to do it like New York is doing to an extent. The businesses may choose to do this. And folks, mask mandates are being lifted across the United States after the CDC ruled on it. In New York, even indoor mask mandates are being lifted. California is talking about doing it within, I believe, a month. And they currently still have it in place, but they are talking about lifting it. Things are lifting up, folks, but watch for what the states determine going forward when it comes to proving you've gotten vaccinated, because they're lifting them on the condition that you're vaccinated. And again, this may be the start of a vaccine passport system where the states or businesses or both begin trying something like this. We'll have to see how it goes. Very likely there'll be challenges to it. Very likely it's going to go to the Supreme Court. I'll keep you all updated on this. All right, folks, that said, I want to go with what's happening with the election audits. For this, we're just going to be broadcasting on Epoch TV. So epochtv.com/crossroads. Before we jump over there, one more question. This is from Cultured Yobo. He said, hi, Josh. What is the true motivation of the Biden regime for calling out CCP human rights abuses? I think it is to deflect attention from their diplomatic and financial support of Iran. Thoughts? That's possible. So far, Secretary of State Blinken, under the Biden administration, does seem to be taking a pretty strong stance against the Chinese Communist Party, even including calling out their use of, for example, live organ harvesting of political dissidents and of religious believers, including, they even mentioned directly, live organ harvesting of Falun Gong practitioners. Again, a Chinese Buddhist discipline based on truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance, which the CCP has been persecuting for a long time. It's not clear what the motivation is for them taking a strong stance on China. Really, this has become more of a global issue by this point. At this point right now, really opposing genocide, because the persecution of Uyghurs, Muslim Uyghurs, was designated a genocide, is a multinational issue. Europe, Australia, many countries are actually taking very similar, stronger stances against the CCP on this. And the Biden administration does seem to be upholding it, which is interesting to watch. A lot of us weren't sure how the Biden administration was going to position itself on that, but it does seem to be the case that they're maintaining a relatively strong stance against the CCP. Even, for example, Nancy Pelosi is calling for a boycott on the Beijing Olympics because of the CCP's human rights abuses. So it is interesting to watch, folks. I'll be keeping you updated on this going forward. All right, folks, that said, let's jump into the next section exclusively on Epoch TV. And so, folks, if you're subscribed to Epoch TV, please go there now. If you're not, please check it out. We have the link in the chat. Please jump there now, epochtv.com/crossroads. Get to it now.